Papa Bear needs a new pair of shoes. Oh, God.
Not too big, not too small, just right.
Why does the tobacco have to be so spicy? God. It says black cherry and I don't taste any cherry. It just tastes like tobacco.
I don't taste any cherry in my nose.
I know what cherries taste like, and this does not taste like cherries. Oh, God.
Welcome to the Trash Cats Trashcast. I'm Richard.
I'm Steven.
And today we're injecting barbiturates into one arm and meth in the other, and putting on the hypno goggles as we take a look into the godless project that is MK Ultra.
So well said.
Thank you. You wrote it.
How was your week, man?
It's been all right. The depression's kicking off. It's getting a little better, so that's a huge plus.
Hell yeah.
But other than that, it's been pretty uneventful and chill. How you doing?
Chilling, vibing. I'm doing okay. I'm palping out a bit. I just took about 10 hits of acid, and I snorted like 5 lines of caffeine powder, subs, and snus, and I am recording with a nosebleed over here. I got blood all over the keyboard, but we're doing good. This week's better than last week, and been kind of weird, feeling a little wacky, but I'm ready to talk MK.
You were feeling wacky? You don't think it's all that acid? And what is subs?
Suboxone.
Oh, okay, yeah.
For heroin addiction.
Well, that's right. For your crippling heroin addiction.
It's pretty cool stuff. Gets me out of bed in the morning.
Hell yeah. Everyone's got to have something, right?
A couple of Vaporunis, some caffeine pills, Suboxone, lay there for 20 minutes trying not to kill myself. Then I get up and go to work, Oodle-lolly, golly, what a day. Drink 2 Monsters before I work on my computer.
There you go.
Yeah, you know.
How a champion starts their day.
Amen, brother.
Speaking of champions, you got an honorable mention for us?
Fuck yeah, Charles Manson. Dude, the album, because we're talking MK Ultra, the album Lie, The Love and Terror Cult is the debut studio album of the American musician and convicted murderer Charles Manson. It's worth a listen. There's like a handful of decent songs on there, but it really makes you look at them differently.
Yeah, that's one of those, like most of the time when people bring up Charles Manson, no one's talking about his, his music.
Yeah, it's like, are you even a fan? Do you have every album?
Right.
Because I do.
Name 3 albums.
It's not a bad album. It was when he was writing a couple songs for the Beach Boys and stuff, but and it was produced by the guy that did tracks for Rolling Stones and Frank Zappa. Like
oh yeah.
The song "Look at Your Game Girl" in specific, pretty decent, and "Garbage Dump's" a fun one.
Garbage Dump.
Oh, garbage dump. Oh, garbage dump. You sure are a garbage dump. And then
that's very on track. That should be our motto or something.
It's right up there.
Oh, garbage dump. Oh, garbage dump. Why are you called a garbage dump? Oh, garbage dump. Oh, garbage dump. Why are you called a garbage dump?
And then second, Beyond the Black Rainbow. I forget, did you watch that one?
I don't think I have, no.
It's like synthwave sci-fi horror, but it's really good. It's
okay.
It's strange, but it's one of those movies that's an actual artistic experience. It's not like the movie itself is going to be something you hold with you forever, but the feeling of what the movie was like, it is pretty special. That Curiosity Cabinet by Del Toro.
Yeah.
The second last episode is by the same director, and it is probably one of the most visually beautiful directed shorts I've ever seen. It is stunning. And this whole movie, Beyond the Black Rainbow, is very similar. And the Del Toro one, it has Eric Andre. plays a small
Yeah,
role.
that's right. You did tell me about that. I still haven't gotten to that one yet.
It's pretty incredible. I mean, the plot's not my favorite, but the visual aesthetics for film is like top tier.
Hell yeah.
So good. And then also listen to Velvet Acid Christ, Fun with Drugs, just 'cause it's
Yeah,
a
for
classic.
sure.
Yeah.
That was a band I had no idea existed, and you turned me onto them. And just the name alone, I was
all
like,
you need.
it's not typically the type of music I would listen to, but the name alone was like, all right, you've earned your cool points with me. Like I want to listen. I want to have this available to listen to.
Yeah, definite sewer mutant music.
Yeah,
That was my high school shit for sure. But I think we should get to it. We got a lot to get through.
Yeah, we do.
This is a wild ride. So you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Project MK Ultra was an illegal human experimentation program designed and undertaken by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, intended to develop procedures and identify drugs that could be used in interrogations to weaken individuals and force confessions through brainwashing and psychological torture.
So a quick aside.
That's a lot to take in.
Well, this is like the one conspiracy theory people should be focusing on.
Well, they came out and stated that, oh yeah, no, it's true. Like we definitely did this. And then people were like, oh, it's not a conspiracy theory anymore. Now it's just a regular bad thing that happened. So it's not a big deal anymore.
It's just an atrocity now.
Yeah, it's just an atrocity that we committed. It's not a big deal.
And while typing these notes, I accidentally emailed them to my work email. And the email looks so unhinged. It is so fucking funny because it's like my abbreviated notes before I type them up. And I really hope some IT guy comes across it.
It just kind of pops up. So it definitely got flagged like immediately.
Oh, for sure. But the whole deal is this MK Ultra project essentially functioned as the psychological branch of the military. And this stemmed from both the Korean War and then the Cold War due to the U.S. response to communism. Because there were all these U.S. troops coming back from war, and some of them were like getting influenced into communism, and we wanted to understand why and how to combat that, and how to change people's minds through altered consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And this project that became MK just kept growing and developed into all these sub-projects. But it began in 1953 and was halted in 1973, so it had a good 20-year run. MK Ultra used numerous methods to manipulate its subjects' mental states and brain functions, such as covert administration of high doses of psychoactive drugs, especially LSD, and other chemicals, electroshock therapy, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal sexual abuse, in addition to various other forms of torture. And the effects of MK Ultra would basically go on to inform how our government would treat enhanced interrogation into the modern day.
Enhanced interrogation.
Enhanced, extra enhanced.
It's next level shit.
My favorite one really is that the injections of meth or an amphetamine into one arm and a barbiturate into the other, because that's some wild shit.
Yeah, that's some wackadoo.
If you're ever bored on the weekend,
oh god,
highly recommend. I do want to make the disclaimer. A lot of this, this isn't our specialty. We've researched people that have done research, and there are definitely elements of the things we're looking into that are not 100%. But the central theme of what happened and what went on is known, and many of those documents have gone public. So do your own additional research, but there's a ton of very reputable people that have proven much, if not all, these things did happen. So
before we get too tight on MK Ultra, we have to understand where it came from. MKUltra was preceded by two drug-related experiments, Project Bluebird and Project Artichoke. It was organized through the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence and coordinated with the United States Army Biological Warfare Laboratories. The program engaged in illegal activities, including the use of U.S. and Canadian citizens as unwitting test subjects.
Over 7,000 American veterans took part in these experiments non-consensually during the 1950s through 1970s. Many of them later would sue the U.S. government. MKUltra's scope was broad, with activities carried out under the guise of research at more than 80 institutions, aside from the military, including colleges, universities, hospitals, student medical programs, psych wards, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies. The CIA operated using front organizations, although some top officials at these institutions were aware of the CIA's involvement.
MKUltra was first brought to public attention in 1975 by the Church Committee of the United States Congress and Gerald Ford's President's Commission on CIA Activities within the United States, also known as the Rockefeller Commission. Investigative efforts were hampered by the CIA Director Richard Helms' order that all MKUltra files be destroyed in 1973.
This meant that the Church Committee and the Rockefeller Commission investigations relied on sworn testimony of direct participants and on the small number of documents that survived Helms' order. In 1977, a Freedom of Information Act request uncovered a cache of 20,000 documents relating to MKUltra, which led to Senate hearings. Some surviving information about MKUltra was declassified later in July of 2001.
According to Stephen Kinzer, the CIA project, quote, was a continuation of the work begun in World War II-era Japanese facilities and Nazi concentration camps on subduing and controlling human minds, end quote. Kinzer writes that MKUltra's use of mescaline on unwitting subjects was a practice that Nazi doctors had begun in the camps at Auschwitz and Dachau?
I believe it's Dachau. Kinzer gives evidence of the continuation of a Nazi agenda, citing the CIA's secret recruitment of Nazi torturers and vivisectionists to continue experimenting on thousands of subjects, and Nazis were brought to Fort Detrick, Maryland to instruct CIA officers on lethal uses of sarin gas.
The Soviet Union also contributed greatly to the motivation for this project. According to CIA Director Alan Dulles, fear of Soviet brain perversion techniques was palpable.
The CIA wanted to verse itself in this type of mind control, to be able to recognize and use it in cases of conflict with the USSR. Fear of the enemy ran rampant among Americans, especially among the sharp increase in PTSD and Korean POWs. The damage incurred on these survivors was so severe that mind control was thought to be the culprit.
The MKUltra cryptonym is a combination of the digraph MK, indicating the sponsorship of the technical services staff, and the word Ultra, which formerly designated the most secret classification of World War II intelligence. Other related cryptonyms include Project MK Naomi and Project MK Delta. MK Delta was established to oversee the use of MKUltra materials abroad. According to the Church Committee, such materials were used on a number of occasions.
The project was headed by Sidney Gottlieb, but began on the order of the CIA Director Alan Dulles on April 13, 1953. Its aim was to develop mind-controlling drugs for use against the Soviet bloc in response to alleged Soviet, Chinese, and Northern Korean use of mind-controlled techniques on U.S. prisoners of war during the Korean War.
The CIA wanted to use similar methods on their own captives, and was interested in manipulating foreign leaders with such techniques, devising several schemes to drug Fidel Castro. It often conducted experiments without the subject's knowledge or consent. In some cases, academic researchers were funded through the grants of CIA front organizations, but were unaware that the CIA was using their work for these purposes.
Supposedly on one occasion, Fidel was doing a broadcast live on the radio, and the CIA's goal was to drug him with an aerosol LSD during the broadcast in hopes of him embarrassing himself. They also supposedly went to pretty extreme measures to poison his shampoo with a specific poison that would make his hair fall out or break in hopes that his beard falling out would make him look weak and lose the trust of his people.
Jesus. Some brutal fucking it's not mind control, but it's like that when you look in the mirror and you don't recognize yourself and you can't figure out what's wrong with it kind of problem.
Yeah, like, I mean, all these sub-projects, there's some real spycraft shit going on. Like, they called Sidney Gottlieb, after his death, they called him the poisoner-in-chief.
Damn.
The projects attempted to produce a perfect truth drug for interrogating suspected Soviet spies during the Cold War and to explore other possibilities of mind control. Subproject 54 was the Navy's top-secret Perfect Concussion Program, which was supposed to use sub-aural frequency blasts to erase memory. The project was never carried out.
Most MK Ultra records were destroyed in 1973 by order of CIA Director Richard Helms, so it has been difficult for investigators to gain a complete understanding of more than 150 funded research subprojects sponsored by MK Ultra and related CIA programs.
Supposedly, MK Ultra was really what had influenced the CIA to incorporate burn barrels into their bases. No idea if that's true, but that's supposedly the thing. The project began during a period of what English journalist Rupert Cornwell described as paranoia at the CIA, when the US had lost its nuclear monopoly and fear of communism was at its height. CIA counterintelligence chief James Jesus Angleton believed that a mole had penetrated the organization at its highest levels.
The agency poured millions of dollars into studies examining ways to influence and control the mind and to enhance its ability to extract information from resistant subjects during interrogation. Some historians assert that one goal of MK Ultra and related CIA projects was to create a Manchurian Candidate-style subject.
If you're not familiar with the whole Manchurian Candidate thing, I believe it started with the concept of how to make a person transport information to and from unknowingly. Mm-hmm. And this whole concept turned into basically trying to make this candidate, a person, so hypnotized or altered that they would not remember it and you could use them at will, whether it was to move information, function as a spy, or kill foreign dictators or whatever the fuck. American historian Alfred W. McCoy has claimed that the CIA attempted to focus media attention on these sort of ridiculous programs so that the public would not look into the research's primary goal, which was effective methods of interrogation. Which I could see there being some truth to that. I feel like they give up some of their cards some of the time.
Kind of got you. Give people something so that they focus on that instead, right?
I think that's what's going on with the UFO shit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty crazy they're having these real, meetings and public conversation about UFOs in our lifetime. I feel like it's just Chinese spacecraft.
I mean, that would explain why we don't know what it is.
Yeah, there's been a lot of reports of technology that was made by other countries specifically to scramble our radar systems and look like aircraft is there that isn't. So it's like, it doesn't seem that far-fetched. It's just really surprising it would go this public that...
Yeah, it seems way more possible that that's the case rather than
right.
There's aliens out there and they're attempting to contact us, but like it's all in the hush hush because the government's
they're too speedy for us to catch up. Yeah,
they only want to talk to the president and shit. Like they don't.
Like I really want Bob Lazar to be right and aliens to exist, but this isn't it.
It's not that way.
No.
One 1955 MK Ultra document gives an indication of the size and range of the effort. It refers to the study of an assortment of mind-altering substances described as follows. Substances which will provide illogical thinking and impulsiveness to the point where the recipient would be discredited in public. Substances that increase the efficiency of mentation and perception.
Materials which will prevent or counteract the intoxicating effects of alcohol. Materials which will promote the intoxicating effects of alcohol.
Materials which will produce the signs and symptoms of recognized diseases in a reversible way so that they may use for malingering. Materials which will render the induction of hypnosis easier and otherwise enhance its usefulness.
Substance which will enhance the ability of the individual to withstand privation, torture, and coercion during interrogation and so-called brainwashing. Materials and physical methods which will produce amnesia for events preceding and during their use.
Physical methods of producing shock and confusion over extended periods of time and capable of surreptitious use. Substances which provide physical disablement such as paralysis of the legs, acute anemia, etc.
That's brutal. Substances which will produce pure euphoria with no subsequent letdown. Substances that alter personality structure in such a way that the tendency of the recipient to become dependent upon another person is enhanced.
A material which will cause mental confusion of such a type, the individual under its influence will find it difficult to maintain a fabrication under questioning. Substances which will lower the ambition and general working efficiency of men when administered in undetectable amounts.
Substances which promote weakness or distortion of the eyesight or hearing faculties, preferably without permanent effect. A knockout pill which can be surreptitiously administered in drinks, food, cigarettes, or aerosol, etc., which will be safe to use, provide a maximum of amnesia, and be suitable for use by agent types on an ad hoc basis.
A material which can be surreptitiously administered by the above routes and which in very small amounts will make it impossible for a person to perform physical activity.
Now, I gotta say, these are some pretty cool goals. Like, they were really doing it, huh?
That's real brutal shit.
It really is. I mean, as insidious as many of these things are, the real world capabilities, especially for this time in world and American culture, I mean, this is powerful shit. This is stuff that should be figured out. It just seems the whole like cloak and dagger element and administration to unknowing subjects, it just makes it so dark.
Yeah.
If you really want to lighten it up, you should YouTube Army soldiers on acid.
Oh, good.
Because there's a bunch of videos of these soldiers trying to go through like different drill structure shit while they're tripping out. And it's pretty wild.
That's pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
I'm into it. CIA documents suggest that they investigated chemical, biological, and radiological methods of mind control as part of MKUltra. They spent an estimated $10 million or more, roughly $87.5 million adjusted for inflation.
Did you see this week the Pentagon's budget report came out?
I did not.
They are unable to account of over 60% of their funding for the last so many years.
Oh.
Like all of their money is 60% of their money is unaccounted.
Jesus.
They don't know where it's at, whether it went into different projects or it's just been stolen. The Pentagon does not know where their money is. Like that's crazy, dude.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked. That's a huge ball to drop.
Yeah, I mean, normally you can look at the budget and you can see what percentage of it goes into private projects that they can't report about. Mm-hmm. This is different. This is 60% of their money. They are reporting that they don't know where it is, which is fucked.
It's like if that's how much they're reporting, they don't know where it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they know where it is and they are not willing to tell the American people. Which
right.
50-50. Early CIA efforts focused on LSD-25, which later came to dominate many of the MKUltra programs. The CIA wanted to know if they could make Soviet spies defect against their will and whether the Soviets could do the same to our own CIA operatives.
Documents obtained by the CIA and John D. Marks under Freedom of Information in 1976 showed that in 1953, the CIA considered purchasing 10 kilograms of LSD, enough for 100 million doses. The proposed purchase aimed to stop other countries from controlling the supply. The documents showed that CIA purchased some quantities of LSD from Sandow's laboratory in Switzerland.
Yeah, so this is wild because there were like small pharmaceutical labs that had been producing LSD as they experimented with different research chemicals. And supposedly the guy that invented it, he was working with the ergot bacteria or whatever. And he, is just at work one day and he accidentally touches this chemical he's making, which would be later known as acid. And he just trips the fuck out in his lab. And that's how he came to make LSD. And the US government, through the CIA, is trying to find a way to source this drug for MKUltra. So they go to these Swedish labs, and they're spending, it was something like over $400,000 for their first initial buy, which at that time in history, no one had ever had that quantity of LSD or that powerful of a psychedelic drug. This was the world's largest psychedelic drug purchase ever. And these labs, due to the funding from the CIA, would later, from LSD 25, it would later be branded as Orange Sunshine. And due to the CIA's pushing of LSD, basically they started Orange Sunshine, which dominated the 70s.
Damn.
Once Project MKUltra got underway in April of 1953, experiments included administering LSD to mental patients, prisoners, drug addicts, and prostitutes, people who could not fight back, as one agency officer would put it. In one case, they administered LSD to a mental patient in Kentucky for 174 days continuously. Jesus. They also administered LSD to CIA employees, military personnel, doctors, other government agents, and members of the general public to study their reactions. And they often, in the CIA offices, would do this to each other in the office unknowingly. Like it was like a whole culture or a ritual where the guys studying this would often be dosing each other. And they often would be working with these ex-Nazi scientists, and they'd be bragging about their different inhumane human experiments, and they'd be going around dosing each other at the office. Like, it's like crazy as fuck.
It's real fucked up shit. The aim was to find drugs that would bring out deep confessions or wipe a subject's mind clean and program them as a robot agent. Military personnel who received the mind-altering drugs were also threatened with court-martials if they told anyone about the experiments.
Additionally, this is something that doesn't get talked about as much, but the CIA also had these facilities in other countries. There was a Dr. Cameron that functioned out of a psych place in Canada. He would often use shock therapy, induce insulin comas, all of these very insidious techniques on unknowing patients who were often there for very minor things. LSD and other drugs were often administered without the subject's knowledge or informed consent, a violation of the Nuremberg Code the U.S. had agreed to follow after World War II. Many veterans were subjected to experimentation, are now seeking legal and monetary reparations.
In Operation Midnight Climax, the CIA set up several brothels within agency safe houses in San Francisco to obtain a selection of men who would be too embarrassed to talk about the events. The men were dosed with LSD, the brothels were equipped with one-way mirrors, and the sessions were filmed for later viewing and study.
The essential goal of Operation Midnight Climax was to find out how much men under the influence would talk after sex.
Yeah.
Supposedly these prostitutes were instructed to slip LSD into the John's drinks, or an LSD aerosol was used, and these scientists would study them. And this is kind of where our crossover with Charles Manson comes in, because many of these prostitutes were given get-out-of-jail-free cards, and through these projects such as Midnight Climax, LSD was leaking its way onto the streets. We'll circle back to Charles Manson here in a bit. In other experiments where people were given LSD without their knowledge, they were interrogated under bright lights with doctors in the background taking notes. They told the subject that they would extend their trips if they refused to reveal their secrets. Some of the people that underwent this interrogation were actually CIA employees, U.S. military personnel, and agents suspected of working for the other side in the Cold War. So we were interrogating some of our own people with these methods.
Long-term debilitation and several deaths resulted from this. Heroin addicts were bribed into taking LSD with offers of more heroin.
That's a pretty good deal.
Here, take this drugs. We'll give you some more drugs.
Oh, awesome. One of the more insidious ones I had heard too was they had these, they were basically like they would implant electrodes into people's brains and then give you this psychedelic football helmet that would play like hypnotized messages through speakers in your ears constantly and had lights in your peripheral going off, and they would shock your brain with it. And some of these, I don't know.
Some Clockwork Orange shit.
Yeah, like I don't know some of these more exotic sub-projects, how accurate this would be or not, but supposedly people were forced to wear them for months at a time, which would be absolute insanity.
Yeah, seriously. And even the guy you mentioned earlier that they drugged him, every day for 174 days.
Yeah.
That's maddening. That sounds awful.
There's this place that some of the more long-term stuff was done, and it was actually most of the participants for the long-term stuff was done by veterans who agreed to do it. They were veterans who had got out of a war, super brain damage, PTSD stuff, and they just loved how acid made them feel, and they had no idea what was happening to them. And many of them did press lawsuits later.
I'm sure. Additionally, the project studied the effect of psychoactive drugs, particularly LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, cocaine, AMT, and DMT on people. What is AMT? I've never even heard of that one.
Let's look it up. I'm pretty sure it's something similar to DMT. Psychedelic stimulant in the drug of
like
the tryptophan class. So it's that turkey acid.
That turkey acid. That sounds like, isn't that basically what, what's it called, PCP is?
It's probably not that far from it. Like, it's probably more acidy, but it's not that different from a PCP or something. I used to get research chemicals from Canada because their laws with things like acid, as long as they could like upgrade a molecule here and there, they could get it. You could buy it semi-legally, and you could just order it to the US, but it would be all these like acid derivatives. But changing a molecule here and there, it still would be essentially acid, but there were certain batches that you really didn't know what the fuck you were taking.
Yeah, that's what I mostly heard growing up was like, if you're like, no one's making like, you're not getting real LSD. Like, you're not getting like real acid anymore. Like, what you're getting is derivatives of and stuff like that. So
there's still really pure and potent acid out there. It's just, it's very tight-knit circles. Like, the psychedelic drug users are their own like cult family. They're all going to these stupid music festivals and just like trading psych drugs. Like, most of them aren't into the other heavy drug scenes as much, so it's almost like a separate circle. But there's some really potent acid out there, and there's tons of it. And then there's all these other, like, a whole family tree of other psychedelics that are unclassified, untested. You have no idea what you're actually getting, but there is really good acid out there still. Just kind of hard to find. The Office of Security used LSD in interrogations, but Sidney Gottlieb, the chemist who directed MKUltra, had other ideas. He thought it could be used in covert operations. Since its effects were temporary, he believed it could be given to high-ranking officials and in this way affect the course of important meetings, speeches, etc. Since he realized that there was a difference in testing the drug in a laboratory and using it in clandestine operations, he initiated a series of experiments where LSD was given to people in a normal setting without warning.
At first, everyone in technical services tried it. A typical experiment involved two people in a room where they observed each other for hours and took notes. As the experimentation progressed, a point arrived where outsiders were drugged with no explanation whatsoever, and surprise acid trips became something of an occupational hazard among CIA operatives.
Dude, it's so fucking
It's so fucking wild.
Yeah.
Adverse reactions often occurred, such as an operative who received the drug in his morning coffee, became psychotic, and ran across Washington seeing a monster in every car passing him.
After you found out you would get dosed, you would like go tell your boss and like, "Oh, go home for the day. It's fine."
Yeah. Go drive home.
Yeah. The experiments continued even after Frank Olson, an army chemist, was covertly dosed by a CIA superior, and 9 days later, he plunged to his death from the window of a 13-story New York City hotel room. supposedly as a result of the deep depression induced by the drug. According to Stephen Kinzer, Olson had approached his superiors sometime earlier, doubting the morality of the project, and he had asked to resign from the CIA. Now, this is a particularly interesting one. I highly recommend watching Wormwood.
Yeah, we're going to get more into him a little bit, but
he knew something. I have
he knew some shit. He's seen some shit.
I got some details on it for you.
All right, cool. Some subjects' participation was consensual, and in these cases, they appeared to be singled out for even more extreme experiments. In one case, 7 volunteers in Kentucky were given LSD for 77 consecutive days.
Oof. In Kentucky? That would be a nightmare.
Get some hillbillies on acid?
I did acid in Kentucky one time, and I wanted to blow my brains out. I can't imagine.
Just running through nonstop cornfields, endless cornfields.
It's terrible. Kentucky's for meth, not acid. Okay? MK Ultra's researchers later dismissed LSD as too unpredictable in its results. They gave up the notion that LSD was the secret that was going to unlock the universe, but it still had a place in the cloak and dagger arsenal. However, by 1962, the CIA and the Army had developed a series of super hallucinogens, such as the highly touted BZ, which was thought to hold greater promise as a mind control weapon.
This resulted in the withdrawal of support by many academics and private researchers, and LSD research became less of a priority altogether.
Another technique investigated was the intravenous administration of a barbiturate into one arm and a methamphetamine into the other. The barbiturates were released into the person first, and as soon as the person began to fall asleep, the amphetamines were released into the other. Other experiments involved heroin, morphine, temazepam under the code name MK Search, mescaline, psilocybin, scopolamine, alcohol, and sodium pentothal, the truth serum. Scopolamines, there's story. That's the zombie powder shit.
Oh, cool.
And sodium pentothal is the true serum. But scopolamine is actually the drug that's in seasickness pouches.
Oh.
In a very small dose. And some people harvest it from those patches. And do you know those flowers called angel's trumpets?
Yes.
That's in those flowers.
Okay, cool. Those ones came up. Of course, when you're young and you're looking for a way to get high and you can't get drugs, you look for where can I find drugs? What can I use to get high? And that was one of the things was you can get morning glories, but you're probably going to get hella sick before you actually get high. And the angel's trumpets was one.
People very regularly get severely poisoned from the angel trumpet flowers. Last year, it was a viral social media thing. Some chick took selfies of herself sniffing a massive angel's trumpet, and she was in a coma in the hospital for a week.
Jesus.
It can be very potent in wildflowers.
Declassified MK Ultra documents indicate they studied hypnosis in the early 1950s. Experimental goals included creating hypnotically induced anxieties and hypnotically increasing ability to learn and recall complex written matter, studying hypnosis in polygraph examinations, hypnotically increasing ability to observe and recall complex arrangements of physical objects, and studying relationship of personality to susceptibility to hypnosis. They conducted experiments with drug-induced hypnosis with anterograde and retrograde amnesia while under the influence of such drugs.
Holy shit.
It's wild shit.
In areas under American control in the 1950s in Europe and East Asia, mostly Japan, Germany, and the Philippines, the CIA created secret detention centers so that the U.S. could avoid criminal prosecution. The CIA captured people suspected of being enemy agents and other people it deemed expendable to undertake various types of torture and human experimentations on them. I even read one. Now, this is, I don't know where the exact truth is, but supposedly we took many Viet Cong prisoners of war captive.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
And we would bring them to these black sites, dose them with acid, and put them in the knife boxes, where they would each be given a knife and told to fight to the death on acid.
Jesus.
Forced sport for our soldiers. And in one sense, that feels like such an incredible claim, but we also see how things such as MK Ultra led to Abu Ghraib and all the other people we've tortured. it feels like this is the start of so many of those things.
Absolutely. It seems wild, but it doesn't seem unbelievable.
Not at all. It's like scarily real. Now, the thing is I feel like a lot of this, before anyone knew the capabilities of acid and the possibilities of torture, I feel like the science needed to be done. I don't think it needed to be done the way it was.
Right,
you know?
Exactly. The prisoners were interrogated while being administered psychoactive drugs, electroshocked, and subjected to extremes of temperature and sensory isolation to develop a better understanding of how to destroy and control human minds.
Senator Frank Church helped head the Church Committee. We mentioned the Church Committee earlier. It basically is just a special committee. It's not related to actual churches. But it was headed by the Senator Frank Church, an investigation into the practices of U.S. intelligence agencies. So in 1973, amid a government-wide panic caused by Watergate, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all MKUltra files to be destroyed. So because of the CIA's exposure involved in Watergate, that is what sparked so much fear into the CIA's projects, and that's what led to the order of all MKUltra files to be destroyed. Pursuant to this order, most of the CIA's documents regarding the project were destroyed, making a full investigation of MKUltra impossible.
In December 1974, the New York Times alleged that the CIA had conducted illegal domestic activities, including experiments on U.S. citizens during the 1960s. That report prompted investigations by the United States Congress in the form of the Church Committee, and by a commission known as the Rockefeller Commission that looked into the illegal domestic activities of the CIA, the FBI, and the intelligence-related agencies of the military.
In the summer of 1975, Congressional Church Committee reports and the Presidential Rockefeller Commission report revealed to the public for the first time that the CIA and the Department of Defense had conducted experiments on both unwitting and cognizant human subjects as part of an extensive program to find out how much influence and control of human behavior through these psychoactive drugs, such as LSD and mescaline, and other various chemicals, biological, and psychological means.
They also revealed that at least one subject, Frank Olson, had died after administration of LSD. Much of what the Church Committee and Rockefeller Commission learned about MKUltra was contained in a report prepared by the Inspector General's office in 1963 that had survived the destruction of records ordered in 1973. However, it contained very little detail. Sidney Gottlieb, who had retired from the CIA 2 years previously and had headed MKUltra, was interviewed by the committee, but claimed to have very little recollection of the activities of MKUltra.
The Congressional Committee investigating CIA research stated, prior consent was obviously not attained for many of these subjects. The committee noted that the experiments sponsored by these researchers call into question the decisions by the agency not to fix guidelines for experiments.
Following the recommendations of the Church Committee, President Gerald Ford in 1976 issued the first executive order on intelligence activities, which, among other things, prohibited experimentation with drugs on human subjects, except in the informed consent in writing and witnessed by a disinterested party of each human subject, and in accordance with guidelines issued by the National Commission. Subsequent orders by Presidents Carter and Reagan expanded the directive to apply to any human experimentation.
God, you can only imagine what kind of tests they do on willing, quote-unquote, participants today.
Right, exactly.
Like, what super drugs does the U.S. government have today? You can only imagine.
Oh, man, they got the good shit. They got the real powerful shit.
Well, like, there's all these drugs now that are...
They got those Avatar drugs. Send you to Avatar Land.
Like, there's so many different subcutaneous drugs or like insulin things that you get under your skin or whatever. Like, you could have a long-term continuous psychoactive drug like bleeding into your bloodstream. They could be doing all kinds of wild shit today.
Yeah.
In 1977, during a hearing held by the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence to look farther into MKUltra, Admiral Stansfield Turner, the then director of Central Intelligence, revealed that the CIA had found a set of records consisting of about 20,000 pages that had survived the 1973 destruction orders because they had been incorrectly stored at the Records Center, not usually used for such documents. These files dealt with the financing of the MKUltra projects and contained few project details, but much more was learned from them than the Inspector General's 1963 report.
On the Senate floor in 1977, Senator Ted Kennedy said, "The deputy director of the CIA revealed that over 30 universities and institutions were involved in an extensive testing and experimentation program, which included covert drug tests on unwitting citizens at all social levels, high and low, American and foreign. Some of these tests involved the administration of LSD to unwitting subjects in social situations."
Bro, that was Ted Kennedy who said that.
Right?
That's so wild. Yeah, they were like very often using universities to coax in students through fake student social programs and dose them, which is so wild, so fucked. In Canada, the issue took much longer to surface, becoming widely known in 1984 on a CBC news show, The Fifth Estate. It was learned that not only had the CIA funded Dr. Cameron's efforts, but also that the Canadian government was fully aware of this and had later provided an additional $500,000 in funding to continue the experiments. This is the psych facility in Canada I mentioned earlier. This revelation largely derailed efforts by the victims to sue the CIA as their US counterparts had, and the Canadian government eventually settled out of court for $100,000 to each of the 127 victims. Dr. Cameron died on September 8, 1967, after suffering a heart attack while him and his son were mountain climbing. None of Cameron's personal records of his involvement with MKUltra survive because his family destroyed them after his death. The CIA itself subsequently acknowledged that these tests had little scientific rationale. So if we circle back to Frank Olson, the guy who flew out the fucking window, this was attributed to Frank Olson being subjected without his knowledge to such experimentation 9 days before his death. Olson, a United States Army biochemist and biological weapons researcher, was given LSD without his knowledge or consent in November of 1953 as part of CIA experimentations and died by supposed suicide by jumping out of a 13th-story window a week later.
A CIA doctor assigned to monitor Olson claimed to have been asleep in another bed in a New York City hotel room when Olson fell to his death. In 1953, Olson's death was described as a suicide that had occurred during a severe psychotic episode. The CIA's own internal investigation concluded that the head of MKUltra, Sidney Gottlieb, had conducted the LSD experiment with Olson's prior knowledge, although neither Olson nor the other men taking part of the experiment were informed as to the exact nature of the drug until some 20 minutes after its ingestion.
The report further suggested that Gottlieb was nonetheless due a reprimand, as he failed to take into account Olson's already diagnosed suicidal tendencies, which might have been exacerbated by the LSD. The Olson family disputes the official version of events.
They maintain that Frank Olson was murdered because, especially in the aftermath of his LSD experience, he had become a security risk who might divulge state secrets associated with highly classified CIA programs, about many of which he had direct personal knowledge.
A few days before his death, Frank Olson quit his position as acting chief of the Special Operations Division at Detrick, Maryland, later Fort Detrick, because of a severe moral crisis concerning the nature of its biological weapons research. Among Olson's concerns were the development of assassination materials used by the CIA's use of biological warfare materials in covert operations, experimentation with biological weapons in populated areas, collaboration with former Nazi scientists under the Operation Paperclip, which was an operation where we acquired all these Nazi scientists and they were no charges, they just had to work for the US government. LSD mind control research, and the use of psychoactive drugs during terminal interrogations under a program codenamed Project Artichoke.
The tastiest project.
Shit's delicious.
Later forensic evidence conflicted with the official version of events. When Olson's body was exhumed in 1994, cranial injuries indicated that Olson had been knocked unconscious before he exited the window. The medical examiner termed Olson's death a homicide. In 1975, Olson's family received a $750,000 settlement from the U.S. government and formal apologies from President Gerald Ford and the CIA Director William Colby, though their apologies were limited to informed consent issues concerning Olson's ingestion of LSD.
On the 28th of November 2012, the Olson family filed a suit against the U.S. federal government for the wrongful death of Frank Olson. The case was dismissed in July 2013, due in part to the 1976 settlement between the family and the government. In this decision dismissing the suit, U.S. District Judge James Boseberg wrote, "While the court must limit its analysis to the four corners of the complaint, the skeptical reader may wish to know that the public records support many of the allegations in the family suit, far-fetched as they may sound." End quote. The inside scoop is that Frank Olson, he was initially dosed unknowingly at a CIA retreat, at a cabin, right? It affects him profoundly. And following that, he had willingly or unknowingly taken multiple LSD doses in those coming months to his death. And he starts having this moral crisis. It starts exacerbating his suicidal tendencies or mental illness, and supposedly there were things in his past or operations that he was aware of that he felt were so immoral he no longer could contain it, and he had made either implications or threats of going public. So the reason they were in that hotel room was he was being escorted by some CIA dudes that were taking him basically to, I forget if it was either like a hearing of some sort to determine his CIA status or to a recovery. I believe he did not know where he was going, and they were taking him to address this issue. Supposedly that night they dosed him, and they claim he jumped out, but some of the injuries showed he may have been attacked prior in the hotel room, dosed and thrown out. Supposedly,
wild shit.
Yeah, supposedly on the ground he lived for a few minutes, and he was attempting to tell the doorman of the building something. He's whispering in his dying last breaths, and no one knows what he told this doorman, which would be very interesting to know.
There is one interesting part of this research that I thought was, stuck out to me was I did learn among putting this together the word defenestration, which is just a fancy way of saying you got thrown out a window. That's just what that means. It's pretty cool.
So I think this is the fun part, right? We're going to talk about some of the people that were tied to the MK projects.
Yeah. So these are documented subjects that are on record of having been a test subject of MK Ultra.
I think some of them we have in the notes that are conclusively linked, and some it's a little dubious.
Yeah. But so the first three are all documented subjects.
Gotcha.
And then we have we have a couple alleged subjects as well.
Cool.
American poet Allen Ginsberg first took LSD in an experiment on Stanford University's campus where he could listen to records of his choice. He chose a Gertrude Stein reading, a Tibetan mandala, and Richard Wagner. He said the experience resulted in a slight paranoia that hung on all my acid experiences through the mid-1960s until I learned from meditation how to disperse that. He became an outspoken advocate for psychedelics in the 1960s, and after hearing suspicions that the experiment was CIA-funded, wrote, "Am I, Allen Ginsberg, the product of one of the CIA's lamentable, ill-advised, or triumphantly successful experiments in mind control?"
Ken Kesey, author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, is said to have volunteered for MK Ultra experiments involving LSD and other psychedelic drugs at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Menlo Park while he was a student at nearby Stanford University. Kesey's experiences while under the influence of LSD inspired him to promote the drug outside of the context of the MK Ultra experiments, which influenced the early development of hippie culture. Supposedly, he's one of the fundamental figures in this story, because after he was involved in his initial LSD test, he loved it. And he even went so far as to lie about who he was and get a job at the hospital that was housing the LSD so that he could steal it and administer it to his friends socially. And he was throwing these gatherings of people, dosing them for the first time.
Pretty wild shit.
So cool.
Third one we got is Robert Hunter. He was an American lyricist, singer-songwriter, translator, and poet, best known for his association with Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead. Along with Ken Kesey, Hunter was said to be an early volunteer MKUltra test subject at Stanford University. Stanford test subjects were paid to take LSD, psilocybin, and mescaline, then report on their experiences. These experiences were creatively formative for Hunter. As he describes, "Sit back. Picture yourself swooping up a shell of purple with foam crests of crystal drops, soft nigh as they fall into the sea of morning, creep very softly mist, and then sort of cascade, tinkly bell-like. Must I take you by the hand, ever so slowly type, and then conglomerate, suddenly into a peal of silver, vibrant, uncomprehendingly, blood-singingly, joyously resounding bells. By my faith, if this be insanity, then for the love of God, permit me to remain insane."
Well, that was probably the prettiest thing in this whole podcast.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Holy fuck.
Some real Jerry Garcia sounding ass shit.
All right. Alleged subjects. Boston mobster James Whitey Bulger was alleged to have subjected to weekly injections of LSD and subsequent testing while in prison in Atlanta in 1957. Now, what's particularly interesting about Bulger is I believe he claimed this, and we know now he cut lots of deals with the federal government, so it doesn't seem quite so crazy. But Whitey Bulger was one of the prisoners who volunteered for what he was told as an experiment aimed at finding a cure for schizophrenia. As part of this experiment, he was given LSD every day for more than a year. He later realized that this had nothing to do with schizophrenia, and he was a guinea pig in a government experiment aimed at seeing what people's long-term reactions to LSD was. Essentially, could we make a person lose his mind by feeding him LSD every day over such a long period? Now, he got out of prison after this particular stint, and it is claimed that for the rest of his life, he had permanent tracer vision, and it was like very distracting for him and may have played, I don't know, some role in his future crime after that.
Wow.
I mean, he'd already proven himself a murderer, but probably didn't help if it was real.
Yeah, fucking driving him nuts.
Now, this one I believe is real, but it's not definitive.
Ted Kaczynski, an American domestic terrorist known as the Unabomber, was said to be a subject of a voluntary psychological study alleged by some sources to have been a part of MKUltra. As a sophomore at Harvard, Kaczynski participated in a study described by author Alston Chase as a purposely brutalizing psychological experiment, led by Harvard psychologist Henry Murray. In total, Kaczynski spent 200 hours as part of the study.
Now, what's interesting about this is it's widely believed to the extent that Netflix has put it in multiple of their documentaries on Kaczynski. Yeah. And it's pretty wild. Like the MKUltra in general, they really did network through a lot of these Ivy League schools, whether it's Stanford or Harvard or whatever the fuck. I believe Kaczynski went to Harvard at an early age. I think he was like 16, 17. And
Jesus.
His professors supposedly recruit him into this extracurricular activity, and he feels pressured by upperclassmen who had done the project and not wanting to fail this psychology professor that as a underage child is doing these acid tests. And apparently his personality completely changed after and played a part in his future bombings.
Crazy.
Yeah, there's been nothing definitive about that, but it is very widely believed.
Next we have Marshall Applewhite, the leader of the Heaven's Gate cult, is reputed to have been an MKUltra subject while in the Army in the 1950s, and is mentioned as such by Dr. West in recorded video.
T and Doe off to the Halley's Comet in space because they did too much acid for the government. I have a really cool Heaven's Gate patch that Sarah gave me. Their website is still up. Do you remember their website?
No.
Oh my god, dude. You didn't ever see their old website?
No, I guess not.
Because they're the ones that wore the Nike.
Oh, you know what? I have seen this before.
Yeah, their website is still up to this day. And they all drank the Kool-Aid. It's not the Jim Jones Kool-Aid. They drank their own Kool-Aid, laid down in hopes that they were going to, by killing themselves, they would board Halley's Comet as it passed over them and go to their alien god or whatever the fuck. And they were like castrating themselves and stuff. Wild shit.
That is some crazy shit. Yeah, check this website. This is some
beautiful graphic design for the year it was.
Yeah, it's got some GIF files on the top on the screen. This is some real
It was a legendary website in the old days of the internet, because it was like a pretty early website for its time to have the type of graphics it did, and everyone knew it was a cult. And then people killed themselves, and then the internet basically just made sure it was preserved.
This is like, it's better than the TimeCube website.
Additionally, we have Charles Manson being tied to MKUltra by author Tom O'Neill. If you're not familiar with Tom O'Neill, watch every fucking interview he does and read his fucking book, because he spent 20 fucking years researching Charles Manson, the family, and the Sharon Tate murders. What the fuck? So, beginning with Charles Manson's time in prison, it's alleged that he took part in a drug-induced psychological experiment run by the federal government. This continued through his ongoing connection to the CIA's free medical clinic in San Francisco once he was out of prison in 1967. Now, what's particularly convincing about Charles Manson's ties to the project is that he seemed to have a nearly unlimited supply of acid. And as we mentioned with the Operation Midnight Climax, how these women prostitutes were given get out of jail free cards for dosing Johns with acid, for distributing it to different communities so that they could be studied by the MKUltra projects. Yeah. Supposedly, Manson has one of these connects, whether it's because of his family members or whatever the fuck, that he was on probation and he is repeatedly arrested and released without charges. And there's tons of evidence of this. Tom O'Neill spent 20 years of his life finding all of these records of all the times he was arrested and released without charges for things other people never would have had happen. And it's
fucking
believed
nuts.
that's because he was a part of these experiments in some fashion or another.
It's fucking nuts. It's crazy.
Additionally, Tom O'Neill would later go on to meet Marilyn Manson, because Marilyn Manson was so fascinated with the Charles Manson murders, granted his name, and Marilyn Manson wanted to give Tom O'Neill these top secret tapes related to the Tate murders, and he thought they were going to help crack the case. And Tom O'Neill goes there one night while Manson's in this like drug-induced haze, and all these tapes he had already found like 10 years prior.
Oh, cool.
And he just partied with Manson for the night.
You can't end the trip bad. You still you made your way out there. You might as well.
Yeah.
Hang out and fuck around.
I wonder what's going to come of the sexual abuse charges on Manson, because they didn't sound very solid, but I don't think anything's conclusive yet.
Yeah, I don't know. Don't know shit about it.
Yeah. Fun stuff.
Well, I love how that all kind of circled back. We went on this wonderful journey, and it kind of wrapped itself up neatly with some more Chucky Manson stories.
It was fun. God damn.
Jesus Christ, that sounded terrible. I can't wait till you hear that back on recording.
There's blood all over my screen now.
Oh, no, Steven.
And it's crazy. It's not red, it's rainbow. And it's flowing up to the ceiling.
Ooh, Steven, you might have done too many drugs.
Too many. I spilled PCP all over my keyboard again. No.
Let me lick it up real quick. we dab it up with these cigarettes real quick. That actually would be kind of effective, wouldn't it? It would help. Yeah.
So what's the moral of the story?
What's the moral of the story? Don't take drugs from strangers.
Or do.
Or do them. But if you do them, be prepared to not be. You're not going to be able to, sue them or anything. You're not going to be able to do anything about it. Just, if you take drugs from strangers, just, recognize what you're doing. I don't know. Don't be a little bitch about it.
Do them all at once.
Yeah, just take whatever they offer you. If they offer you a couple different things, just take them all at once.
Yeah, every time.
Every time.
Oh, I do have a couple side notes I think are worth mentioning before we get out. So the French village was called Pont Saint-Esprit, the mass poisoning. I think that's worth looking into. Supposedly it was 250 people involved. 50 people went to asylums and 7 people died.
Jesus.
It's linked to the CIA, not definitive, but I feel like it's worth researching. Then I mentioned it last time, the elephant test, the Tusco. So Tusco is a popular name given to elephants in captivity. Several notable elephants have been given this moniker, but Tusco was specifically the name of a male Indian elephant at the Oklahoma City Zoo. On August 3rd, 1962, researchers from the University of Oklahoma injected him with 297 milligrams of LSD, which is nearly 3,000 times the human recreational dose. Within 5 minutes, the elephant collapses to the ground. After 1 hour and 40 minutes, he would die. It is believed that the LSD caused his death, although some speculate that the drugs the researchers used in an attempt to revive him may have complicated it and ultimately killed him.
Jesus fuck.
So Tusco the elephant was given way too much acid, seizes up and dies at a university through a zoo. How crazy is that?
That's fucking psycho.
Just killing acids with elephants.
What was the I guess ideal reaction?
I mean, honestly, at the time,
watch this elephant trip balls. Like oh, maybe he'll start talking now. Like,
well, I would honestly at the time I would imagine it would be to see how much acid a person could take by weight. How much acid can you give to something that's living without it dying? Like I feel like the goal is almost to kill it. Not that I think that's a good goal.
Right. It's like the best case scenario is this thing dies. Jesus Christ.
Sorry, zoo, you don't get your elephant Tusco back.
Fuck.
No, I kind of have thought about it a bit. I think kind of, in a way, I kind of think the moral of the story is that you can't keep a good drug secret for long. In many ways, the CIA became the biggest contributor to the counterculture. While they spent so many years trying to fight it, they were the ones that really fueled the drug that led it. And they brought this new experimental drug called acid from the private labs to the streets across the world through their countless blunders, irresponsibility, lack of concern for human beings. And it's just such definitive proof that not that long ago, our government did not give a fuck about us at all. And more than anything, they have a fundamental lack of understanding of the human psyche, much less mind control. And the moral of the story, can't trust the government, can't keep a good drug secret, and if you find orange sunshine, you better buy it.
I mean, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's like the government's all narcs, man. That they invented the term narcs. You can't trust them. You can't trust them with your drugs.
But they make the best stuff.
They do make the best stuff. You gotta, if they don't make it themselves, they go to the best spot to get it. So if you can get the government drugs, you should get them, but you shouldn't trust them.
You got any dishonorables for you?
No, I mean, other than the, CIA, I guess. I don't know.
CIA is boopers.
Boopers. Thanks again for listening, everyone. Thank you to Approaching Human for the use of his music. You can find his work on SoundCloud at Approaching-Human.
Thanks, John. We got to do the interview soon, motherfucker.
Make sure to check out the show page at Trashcats Trashcast on Instagram for news and arts from the show. Also, check out Facebook for the memes.
The memes. If you're super bored, you can check out my trashy art on Instagram at Skyzix, SKYZICX. I made every single piece on there while taking government acid, so feel free to enjoy.
Man, you weren't sharing? Come on, man. Fuck.
it's just natural. My brain produces it. I don't even
It's just, yeah. You
What do we got
do
next?
enough heroin in your life, your brain just produces government-grade acid.
Every time. I think we're chilling next, and then we got some cool stuff ahead, so stay tuned.
Yeah, that's going to be all for us today. Stay classy, eat trashy.
Go fast, eat trash.